T2 Trainspotting is directed by Danny Boyle, written by John Hodge. It's based on the novels Trainspotting and Porno by Irvine Welsh, and once again stars Ewan McGregor, Ewan Bremner, Johnny Lee Miller, and Robert Carlyle. And T2 Trainspotting takes place 20 years after the first film and sees Renton returning to Edinburgh, where his old friends don't exactly receive him kindly. Now, when I heard that they were making a sequel to Trainspotting, I was extremely hyped, especially because they were coming back with the original cast and Danny Boyle was returning to direct it. And the funny thing is, when I watched this movie, the theater was almost empty. There were like 5 other people watching with me, but they were all reacting properly to like all the references and stuff, so I felt like I was watching this movie with the only Trainspotting fans in the entire country, so thank you for that. And the thing with T2 Trainspotting is I don't really think it quite meshes into a cohesive whole. However, it's a beautiful looking movie with a cast that still hasn't lost their step even 21 years after. Ewan McGregor in this movie is still really good as Renton. He's really convincing as like this older version of Renton who is a bit more mature but still generally quite aimless in his life. Johnny Lee Miller as Sick Boy has much more to do here than he did in the last film, and what's great about his performance is that you're not really sure what to make of him, like whose side he's on, and at points you're not even sure if he's sure about himself and the decisions he's making. Robert Carlyle returns as Begbie, and he is just totally unhinged in this movie. He's even crazier here than he was in the last one, which strangely leads to some sweet moments between him and some people in his life that we haven't seen before. But to me, the guy who stole the show here was Ewan Bremner as Spud. He just has such purity and innocence about him, which is made all the more poignant because when we meet Spud in this movie, he is at his lowest low, and his entire arc is, for me, the best thing about T2 Trainspotting. The other really noteworthy thing about this film is the cinematography by Anthony Dodd Mantle. It is, in my opinion, Oscar-worthy. It looks so great. And I know that the first Trainspotting really looked kind of murky by design, and here it's a lot clearer and a lot more beautiful. But for me, it makes sense because to me, it's like the world has, finally kind of shown its beauty, and these characters are only realizing now that, what's out there is a real possibility for them. There's also some still really solid production design throughout this film, especially at the climax of the movie that uses its setting really well. Now, this wouldn't be a Trainspotting movie without the music, and the soundtrack in this film is still really, really good. There are not as many iconic songs, but there is a great scene where everyone in this pub is singing the Queen, and I thought that was great. And there's another scene that takes place in another pub where Renton and Sick Boy have to improvise a song, and it is so brilliant and it's hilarious. But here's where things start to get a little hit or miss for me. Danny Boyle is still really good here as a director. He delivers a lot of formally exciting sequences again and manages to capture a deeper sense of dread than he did in the first movie, especially because of the presence of Begbie here. But this movie does visibly lack energy in a lot of parts, and I get that they're older characters and they don't have as much energy, but so much of this movie is about nostalgia, so I kind of wanted to see some of that energy still sort of intact. Unfortunately, T2 Trainspotting also does what I think a lot of sequels do, and I hate that they do it. It's that they make way too many unnecessary callbacks, and it's just pointless fan service that doesn't actually progress the story, doesn't actually mean anything. It's just sort of distracting. Don't get me wrong though, I loved seeing where all these characters ended up. I like the fact that the consequences from the first film have still remained, and they're still dealing with those consequences now. And like I mentioned a while ago, the character arc of Spud really works for me. He's the most developed character in this entire movie, and the relationships among these characters are still very realistic, and the themes are still rich. Unfortunately, the plot to T2 Trainspotting just isn't great for me. Whereas the first movie was, more of like a series of vignettes, this movie takes the form of, one big story, but it just can't really sustain that story. Where this movie ends is kind of unclear. I didn't understand some of the character motivations. I really wasn't convinced. And the editing here by John Harris doesn't have the same kick. Like I said, this movie does slow down in a lot of parts. Although it is cool how you get a more well-rounded perspective of all these characters, because we're getting everyone's point of view. We're not really seeing everything from Renton's narration. This movie isn't just Renton judging everybody. We really get everyone's point of view, and so they kind of come off as more sincere. In the end though, I will say that T2 Trainspotting is a pretty good movie. I think if you're not a Trainspotting fan, this won't really do it for you. You'll just kind of feel a bit lost. but I think fans should still love it. There is enough in here that'll satisfy old Trainspotting fans, even if it does have visible flaws. Alright, so those are my thoughts on T2 Trainspotting. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever you guys think, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.